You know, do you ever get that feeling that you're just walking through an invisible maze?
Oh, all the time.
Right. Like you wake up, you pour your coffee, you check your phone, you go to work, and then you worry about your savings account, you get annoyed at traffic, and you just do it all over again.
Yeah, daily grind.
Exactly. And you feel like you're making conscious choices, but I mean, if you look closely, you realize you're just following this predetermined path laid out by your own unchecked impulses.
Well, we operate under the assumption that our daily routines are neutral. Like, we think we're just getting through the day, completely unaware that our repetitive behaviors are slowly building the walls of our own confinement.
Yeah, and today we're doing a deep dive into an incredibly intriguing philosophical piece that claims to have mapped those exact walls.
It's a fascinating text.
It really is. The text is by a writer named Xu Feng, titled 36-8 Trigram Arrays, The Array of Desire. And this was translated by Kinyu. Reading this completely challenged my perspective on what it means to be trapped in our own lives. Because it takes concepts we think we understand perfectly, like addiction, ambition, or even health, and it just completely deconstructs them.
The author is essentially handing us a blueprint of the invisible architecture governing our psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, it forces the reader to confront how seemingly harmless everyday habits are actually deeply rooted defense mechanisms and traps, really.
And that is our mission for today. We're going to decode this framework, map out these invisible traps, what the text calls arrays, and explore the text's surprising, maybe even paradoxical blueprint for breaking free to find actual contentment.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very first thing the text does is redefine a word we throw around all the time, which is addiction.
Yeah, society has conditioned us to view addiction through a very narrow clinical lens. We look for specific physical markers.
Right, we think of substances,
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol, maybe behavioral things like gambling.
Exactly.
We think of something chemical. But this text blows that definition wide open right from the jump. It starts with this incredibly simple premise. It says, the more you eat, the more you crave, the more you sleep, the lazier you become.
It establishes momentum as the core mechanism of addiction rather than just, chemical dependency. The text is pointing out that any behavior can become an addiction if it initiates a runaway feedback loop in your mind.
It goes way beyond the obvious vices. Like, it mentions making money, holding positions of authority, or using the internet. But what genuinely surprised me was when it categorized our negative emotions as addictions.
What's fascinating here is the psychological cascade the author describes. We don't typically view emotions like jealousy, resentment, or the habit of constantly comparing ourselves to others as addictions.
No, not at all.
We view them as temporary reactions or maybe character flaws. But the text argues that criticism, blame, selfishness, and arrogance are highly addictive states of being because they provide an immediate, albeit toxic, psychological reward.
It makes a lot of sense when you observe human behavior, honestly. Like, you meet someone who is constantly complaining about everything.
Oh, we all know someone like that.
Right. They are addicted to the grievance itself. They get a hit of validation or a fleeting feeling of superiority every time they blame someone else for their problems. It's a dopamine hit, just from a different source.
The text explains the mechanics of this beautifully. It says that these emotional habits become our second nature, and this second nature eventually obscures our original or true nature.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a gradual process of losing your baseline self. Once a person develops this unhealthy psychological momentum, pessimism literally becomes the dominant theme of their life.
Think of it like a groove cut into a vinyl record.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the first time you feel that flash of jealousy or you indulge in a petty complaint, it's just the shallow scratch on the surface.
Yeah.
But the more you play that specific emotional note, the deeper the groove gets.
And eventually it's all you can play.
Exactly. Over time, the needle of your mind simply cannot travel anywhere else. It just falls into that rut automatically. The text warns this leads to isolation, rigidity, and eventually depression. You are trapped in the groove.
Which brings us to the core mechanism of the text. Because if we're stuck in these grooves, we have to ask a more profound question. What is fundamentally keeping us there?
All right.
Why is it so incredibly easy to fall into these ruts and almost impossible to climb out?
Because if it's just a bad habit, you should be able to wake up one day and stop. But it feels heavier than that. It feels systemic, almost like gravity.
According to Do Think's text, It is systemic. It's an intentional cosmic design. This is where the text introduces the concept of the 8-trigram array, specifically focusing on the array of desire.
Okay, let me pause you there because the text makes a massive sudden pivot here.
It really does.
It goes from being a psychological self-help guide about complaining to literally talking about the architecture of the universe.
Yeah.
What exactly is an 8-trigram array?
It is a significant leap, but an important one for this philosophy. So, in ancient Eastern cosmology, the 8 trigrams, or bagua, are symbols used to represent the fundamental principles of reality.
Okay.
Think of them as the 8 basic elements or forces that make up the universe. An array, in historical terms, is a tactical military formation designed to trap and confuse an enemy.
Oh, wow. A trap.
Exactly. So when the author talks about the 8-trigram array of desire, they're describing an invisible, energetic matrix. It's a cosmic trap built out of 8 fundamental human desires, designed specifically to maintain a certain number of lives in each level of existence.
Wait, so the text is arguing that our desires were literally a mechanism for keeping us locked in a specific spiritual plane.
It is the exact mechanism.
Huh.
From the text's cosmological perspective, desires create heavy, energetic attachments. They act as anchors.
It's like weights tying us down.
Precisely. The constant floating and sinking in pain, exhaustion, and disappointment is what keeps people trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. If your energy is weighed down by these desires, you cannot ascend to a higher, lighter state of being. You're tethered to this suffering-heavy plane.
The author uses a very visceral, physical metaphor to describe how this tethering works. It says it's like a nose ring on a bull.
Such a powerful image.
I love that imagery because it explains the power dynamics so well. You have this massive, powerful animal capable of incredible force, but it can be completely subdued and led around by a tiny metal ring pierced through a sensitive part of its nose.
The desires act as that nose ring. They pull us back and forth, keeping us pacing within a very confined space of life. We expend all this massive energy, just like the bull, but we never actually go anywhere new.
So let's look at what that nose ring is actually made of. The text outlines the 8 major desires forming this array. We have appetite, affection, which includes sexual desire, desire for pleasure, material desire, desire for reputation, desire for life, desire for possession or control, and finally, the desire for excellence.
It's a comprehensive list of human drivers. However, we have to understand how the text differentiates between simply functioning in the world and being spiritually trapped by it.
Yeah, I found myself pushing back immediately when I read that list.
I think most people do.
I'm thinking, I need to eat to survive. I want to have a comfortable life. I want to do well at my job. Are these things inherently bad? But the text anticipates this exact reaction. It draws a very sharp mechanical line between an everyday need and an ensnaring desire.
The distinction lies entirely in excess and attachment. Normal physiological needs do not trigger the trap. It's only when an individual pushes beyond the baseline need that the array activates.
The food example clarifies this perfectly. Eating because your body requires sustenance to function, that's a need. But constantly obsessing over your next meal, craving high-end delicacies. And the text specifically calls this outslaughtering animals purely to satisfy your palate's demand for specific taste. That crosses the line.
It shifts from a requirement for survival to an obsession for sensory stimulation. And the same logic applies to the desire for pleasure. The text advises taking advantage of natural opportunities for pleasure as they organically arise.
Sure.
But if you're always seeking leisure, indulging in comfort, or pursuing high-end pleasures that waste massive amounts of energy and money, you're being pulled by the nose ring.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I was following along with the food and pleasure arguments, but then the text tackles the desire for life. The author states that taking extreme measures for health, consuming supplements, practicing rigorous meditation for longevity, and living in a state of intoxicated oblivion is a massive trap. I struggle with this one. How is trying to be healthy a negative thing?
This raises an important question about the underlying motivation behind our actions. Why are people biohacking their bodies to live to be 120? The text isn't condemning a jog around the block or eating vegetables.
Right.
It's pointing out the obsession with longevity, which is fundamentally driven by a deep, unacknowledged fear of death.
So the pursuit of extreme health is actually just a mask for the terror of mortality.
The fear of the natural cycle is the trap. If you're spending 3 hours a day meditating and taking 30 supplements just to artificially extend your lifespan, your entire existence is consumed by the fear of ending. The text advises leaving life and death to the greatest creator. or the Tao?
Let's define that for a second because the text references the Tao heavily here. We're talking about the underlying intelligence or natural flow of the universe, correct?
Simply put, yes. The Tao represents the natural order of things. Everything is born, experiences its season, and passes away. The text is advocating for profound acceptance of this rhythm, either desperately craving life nor fearing death.
That concept of gripping the wheel too tightly bleeds right into the next two traps: the desire for possession and the desire for excellence.
Those are big ones.
If obsessing over staying alive is a trap, obsessing over how much power we wield while we're here is an even heavier anchor.
Look at how the text breaks down possession. In modern culture, controlling resources, managing large teams of people, and holding high positions are viewed as the pinnacle of success.
Yeah, that's the dream, right?
But the text views them as immense cognitive burdens. The more you control, the more mental labor, worry, and anxiety you have to endure.
You think you own the possessions, but the possessions actually own you. If you buy a massive yacht, you now work for the yacht.
Exactly.
You have to maintain it, dock it, hire a crew, worry about it sinking. It is a massive drain on your life force.
The administrative weight of maintaining control over people and objects is what exhausts the soul. And that exhaustion is amplified by the desire for excellence, which challenges one of our most deeply held societal norms. From birth, we're told to strive, stand out, and be the absolute best.
But the text argues that striving with every nerve just to stand out, or seeking supernatural abilities just to make other people envious, is futile. It uses a very blunt, slightly humorous example. It says, if you do not have a naturally good singing voice, trying to excel in singing is completely pointless.
Yeah.
We see people exhaust themselves trying to be something they are not fundamentally built to be.
It's a profound waste of energetic potential.
It reminds me of the mechanics of a riptide. You get caught in a strong ocean current, and your panic instinct is to swim as hard as you can directly against it, straight back to the shore.
Right, which is the worst thing you can do.
Exactly, because the current is always stronger than you. That is how people drown. They exhaust themselves fighting the water. The only way to survive a riptide is to stop fighting, let the water carry you out slightly, and swim parallel to the shore until you are out of the pull. You have to work with the ocean, not against it.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the philosophy of the Tao. When we pursue an unnatural excellence, we are fighting the riptide of nature. We're demanding reality bend to our ego. The text advises us to simply express our natural talents to their fullest.
Makes sense.
If you're built to swim, swim. But do not torture yourself trying to fly just for the sake of applause.
We've covered a lot of these traps: appetite, pleasure, life, possession, excellence. But I want to spend time on the three we haven't deeply explored yet because I think they are the ones you listening right now will relate to the most: affection, material, and reputation.
Okay.
If all of these things are keeping the nose ring firmly in place, how do we actually take it off?
The escape route provided by the text is fundamentally about the release of forceful intent. Let's look at the desire for affection. The text doesn't say you shouldn't love people or have relationships.
Oh, good.
Right? It says follow naturally come and go relations. Do not deliberately pursue and do not deliberately avoid.
That is so countercultural to the modern dating landscape. We have apps where people treat finding a partner like a second full-time job. They swipe endlessly, desperately trying to force a connection.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, you have people who have been hurt, so they build massive emotional fortresses to deliberately keep everyone out.
Both of those extremes require immense, exhausting effort. If you're desperately forcing someone to stay in your life who wants to leave, you're essentially managing a psychological hostage situation.
Wow, yeah.
If you're building walls to keep everyone out, you're managing a fortress. The text argues that releasing the grip, letting relationships flow into and out of your life naturally, removes that massive energy expenditure.
It's the same mechanic with the desire for material wealth. The author doesn't demand that you take a vow of extreme poverty and live in a cave. The advice is to prioritize simplicity and practicality.
Because we get trapped on the hedonic treadmill, we buy a bigger house, which requires more furniture, which requires a higher-paying, more stressful job to maintain. The material desire array keeps you running just to stay in the exact same place.
Which feeds directly into the desire for reputation. We spend so much invisible energy managing our PR.
Oh, yeah.
We obsess over what our coworkers think, what our family thinks, how our lives look on social media. We wear other people's opinions like a suit of heavy armor.
The text offers a very clear directive here. Do not seek lasting fame, but also do not be terrified of infamy. Just let your reputation happen naturally. keep your conscience and morals intact, and stop trying to micromanage how you are perceived by the collective.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? I view this text as a mirror. It's asking you to audit your own life and find the places where you are swimming against the riptide.
Right.
Where are you gripping the steering wheel so tightly that your knuckles are turning white? Are you exhausting yourself trying to control a relationship that has run its natural course? Are you spending money you don't have to maintain an image for people you don't even like?
The text is challenging you to release that grip.
Hmm.
And in doing so, it presents what I think is the ultimate philosophical paradox of this entire deep dive.
Hmm.
It suggests that the path to true freedom is pursuing the state of possessing nothing, yet owning everything.
I literally had to read that line 3 times. Possessing nothing, yet owning everything.
It's a brain bender.
It is. The logic seems to be that if you require nothing specific to be happy, if you are entirely content with the natural flow of whatever comes to you, then the entire world is yours. You cannot be threatened.
When you are no longer a slave to your desires, you become immune to disappointment. The text's final promise is that once you step out of the 8 trigram array of desire, the world ceases to be a maze and becomes vast and boundless. The concluding thought is a beautiful riddle. It says, without desire, you can fulfill desires. Without selfishness, you can fulfill selfishness.
Meaning, the very things we spend our lives desperately chasing, happiness, freedom, joy, peace, finally arrive effortlessly the moment we stop demanding them from the universe. It is an incredibly powerful framework.
It really reframes everything.
It does. But as we wrap up our analysis of this material, it leaves me with a completely new question. One that the text doesn't explicitly answer, but that I cannot stop turning over in my head.
Oh, what's the question?
Well, if escaping this array of desire means dropping all forced pursuits, if it means refusing to strive beyond our natural inclinations, never obsessing over our health, not fighting the current, what does that mean for human progress as a species?
That is the friction point between Eastern philosophy and Western expansion.
Think about it. If no one ever obsessed over a problem, if no one ever tried to forcefully defy their own natural limitations or the limitations of their physical environment, would we have ever built the modern world?
Probably not.
Would we have cured diseases, built airplanes, or engineered the internet? All of those achievements required extreme, obsessive, almost unnatural striving. So it begs the question, is the modern world the result of us successfully maximizing our potential? Or is the modern world exactly the exhausting, inescapable array that this text is warning us about? Is our progress actually our prison?
It's the ultimate paradox to walk away with. Have we used our ambition to become the masters of the maze, or have we just exhausted ourselves building a much more complicated trap?
Something to mull over the next time you feel the tug of that invisible nose ring pulling you toward your next desire. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.